afternoon. It is now 1 o'clock, and that means it is time for the Standing Committee on Education to be meeting on today, the 20th of May, 2025. I am Leon van Wyk. I'm the chair of the Standing Committee. I would like to welcome all members, welcome Minister Mania and the members of the department who are here, HOD. And I think just as this is a hybrid meeting, we will also just be touching base with the members who are online. At the outset, I just want to mention that I have been informed that a family member of Member Boyson has passed away, and therefore would like to express my condolences to Member Boyson and to the family. I think I will allow the members just to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Khalid Sayed, member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Benedicta van Minnen. I'm sitting in on this meeting today.
Good afternoon, Member Stevens. I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Peter Johnson, alternate member of this committee.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, Minister, and departmental colleagues. My name is Wendy Kaiser-Philander, and I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning, afternoon, Chairperson. Fallen Christians, a member of this committee.
Thank you very much. I just want to go on to the platform there and just see members there. I think if we can just check, I see that that one little notice there, if we can just take that away, procedural officer.
That's Member Boyson. I can't swim IQ.
I think it could be Member Boyson.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and thank you for the message of condolences, and to my colleagues and the officials. Good afternoon to you too, and I'm Member Boyson, a member of this committee.
Thank you very much, Member Boyson. I'm not sure if I know Member Walters indicated that he could also be on the hybrid program today, so I'm not sure whether he is connected. I'm going to then welcome you, Minister Mania, if you...
Thank you, David Mania, Minister of Education. I'm joined by my head of department, Brent Walters, and the team, which, of course, he will introduce.
Good afternoon, Brent Walters, Head of Education.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Alan Mayer, Deputy Director General, Western Cape Education.
Good afternoon. I'm Sally Abrams. I'm the DDG for Education Planning in the WCD.
Good afternoon, Hani Muasa, Business Strategy at the Education Department.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. My name is Bertram Larison. I'm the Deputy Director General for Curriculum and Assessment Management.
Thank you very much. Our procedural officer is Ms. Wasima Hassan Musa, who's with us today. I've also noticed that there are members of the public. Today's meeting, the purpose of today's meeting is for a briefing by the Western Cape Education Department on its annual performance plan for 25-26 and the strategic plan as well. And we will just seeing where we will let's just yeah, it looks like we've resolved that problem. I think just to remind members that the briefing is to the Standing Committee, and then any questions or comments will flow after the presentation. So I'd like to hand over to you, Minister Mania, for any initial comments, and then we can flow with the presentation.
Thank you, Chairperson. It obviously gives myself and the department great pleasure to appear before the Standing Committee on Education to, as you have mentioned, present on our strategic plan and our annual performance plan, which of course at the broadest level is focused on foundation phase reading, improving learning outcomes, and of course expanding access through infrastructure and partnerships. I would like through you to hand over to Brent Walters, and the team will take us through the presentation. And of course, we stand ready to field any questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Minister, and members who are here, and also those who are online. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think in introducing this presentation, we want to give you a flavor of our strategic plan and our annual performance plan, some of the things that we have set inside those plans to be able to meet all our priorities that we have. So the strategic plan 2030, sorry, it sets out the overarching goals and priorities of the Western Cape Education Department for the next 5 years. It provides a framework for alignment with national and provincial, national and local government policy and strategy. The policy and planning and budget process translates the WCD strategic priorities and goals into actionable plans, budget allocations, and measurable outputs and outcomes. And this ensures that our objectives are effectively implemented and monitored through the cycle. Our strategic plan follows a systems approach that focuses on how we collectively and in synergy deliver outcomes for education across the Western Cape. And the strategic plan 2025 to 2030 also incorporates ministerial priorities and objectives across the 4 Western Cape government priorities and education sector priorities. The strategic plan 2025 to 2030, it also considers alignment with the medium-term development plan, the national development plan, and sustainable development goals. And the department has also incorporated valuable insights gleaned from the recent World Bank's education sector analysis. So I think what we're trying to say in that first slide is that there's a cascading number of plans and that we fit into those plans and we're extension of those plans. If we go to the next slide, we can see there that when we put that onto a pictorial, and we can see that our strategic plan is responsive to a local context, but at the same time being aligned to the vision and strategic direction of the department, of the province, and of national priorities. So if you read that from left to right, then you see that start with the Sustainable Development Goals, into the NDP, into the MTDP, into the basic education sector priorities for the 7th administration, and then into the provincial strategic plan, and then we get the departmental priorities arising out of that. At this point, I'm going to hand over to DDG Sally Abrams, and he will take us through the rest of the presentation, except for one slide. Thank you very much, Sally, and I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon. Again, from my perspective, I'm the head of planning. Important to illuminate the context under which we would have developed this plan on the timeline that is shown on the slide pack. Our endeavours at the start of this term, the 7th administration, was of course to take the cue from the national agenda. And so as the SC had outlined, our plans dovetail with the National Development Plan and the medium-term development framework, or the plan that gives that framework for our priority actions. We would have also worked over the 7-month timeline that's outlined, quite a considered process of sharing goals and priorities with the sector through the Department of Basic Education as it firmed up its priorities for the term ahead, and the provincial government of the Western Cape, who too had set out in its provincial strategic plan its goals and priorities. And so the timeline that's outlined and governed by the budget circulars referred to across that 7-month timeline was initiated by the Department of Education. We had as we transitioned into this term, been clear and focused on a distinct set of priorities, as the Minister alluded to in his introduction. A select few priorities, those 3 priorities, I'll take an opportunity to illuminate again. And we use that as the starting point and the platform to give rise to our agenda for the next 5 years. And so it's been an iterative process of sharing drafts with our provincial counterparts in the province, but also our sectoral counterparts, and of course, our colleagues at national. So it is a well interwoven set of plans that I think will manifest in an alignment on the priorities we've down selected on, and more importantly, given the focus for this presentation in our plans, the target outcomes, the output indicators. We will share some technical insight into that, and my colleague from the Directorate of Business Strategy will help to illuminate that. So as we think about the context in which the medium-term strategic framework was developed, of course, appropriate to illuminate, we continue to operate in a strained macroeconomic environment that has been characterized by budget reprioritization and cuts. Externally also, given our footprint from an education perspective, matters at a macro level like climate change are very real to us. We acknowledge and we consider the resource stress, the assets, our school assets that are under considerable stress. It's been exacerbated not just by climate change, but also obviously it's an aged infrastructure. And of course, we are well aware of the fraying social fabric. So that hangs as a backdrop, and the alignment on priorities and goals will, I would imagine, not be surprising if we consider that the setting has been about improving our economic environment. The MTDP has, as had been noted elsewhere, 3 strategic priorities that looks at inclusive growth and job creation, of course, driving interventions across all spheres of government, reducing poverty and tackling the high cost of living. And we interpret that in focus on ensuring social protection and economic inclusion, and building a capable and ethical developmental state, enhancing governance, law and order, and enabling infrastructure. And those 3 priorities, Chair, form the 2024 to 2029 medium-term development plan framework. In respect of the MTDP priority 2, which the sector most significantly aligns with as it relates to reducing poverty and tackling the high cost of living, 2 key outcomes in that MTDP relevant for the sector: improving education outcomes and skills, and expanding access to early childhood development, will of course guiding us in our development of our own goals and priorities as we relate to the sector priorities. And so we've incorporated output indicators in our 2025-26 APP, which we'll reflect later in this presentation, that aligns with the outcome indicators in the sectoral plans. And so we should see, Chair, some consistency with the Department of Basic Education, the other provinces, of course, as it relates to education, but also broader in the national agenda. And so specifically, we will tackle and align on targets relating to expanding and improving the number of children that have access to quality ECD programs, the proportion of learners who are reaching the required competency levels in reading and literacy, and of course, also at a deeper level, the percentage of learners achieving 60% in grade 12 in mathematics and physical science subjects. Again, these are derived from that national agenda. We have other particular targets in that regard as well, and we'll illuminate them. Those relate to inclusive education, including the numbers of children with special needs, including them to a great extent that we have done. And as I've said before, those are programs underway in the Western Cape as it were as well. So there's very firm alignment here with the medium-term development plan manifesting in the output indicators and goals. As regards the Western Cape Government strategic priorities, defined here and referenced here and defined elsewhere, the Western Cape Education Department is fully aligned with the provincial strategic plan insofar as we have considered, of course, also the economic rationale for education, for investments into education. We recognize with external input that in order to develop actionable strategies that makes the right impact, our focus should be on developing outcomes, developing skills, learning outcomes and developing skills. And we have a more nuanced focus on our the determinants of learning and what drives good learning outcomes. And so we are very focused on human capital development. We are very focused on improving employability through skills development. We are very aligned on the economic growth agenda. And so that being the apex priority for the government, there are other priority targets that we align with as well around safety, educated, healthy and caring society is the pillar that we most clearly align with, but also our advancements on the innovation, culture and governance agenda means that we would necessarily focus our activities and our program on those agenda items as well. So then moving to just one more comment. I think the approach to aligning with those priorities, the provincial strategic plan follows a life course and a systems approach. That means it's a much more integrated approach. It looks at clustering programs that maps to the life cycle of our citizens. And so we engage, of course, at the left-hand side of this roadmap, the younger child, the younger citizen, and are working with our social sector counterparts, economic counterparts and others to contribute those particular programs and activities in support of enriching the lives of those that we serve. In terms of our basic education sector priorities, these were under development but had been settled earlier this year, again derived from the national plans and those MTDPs, specifically around early childhood development and the improvement of literacy, numeracy, and outcomes for at the foundation or the lower phases. Specific programmatic interventions around introducing, where it's appropriate, where it needs to be mother tongue-based bilingual education. I spoke about inclusive education, Chair. There are pronounced targets around improving curriculum delivery and, of course, contextually relevant and ongoing and incisive focus on stabilizing and improving infrastructure delivery and some of the other mechanisms that are so pertinent to improving the learning experience, making sure children get to and from school safely and on time, and protecting all of our stakeholders, all of those stakeholders who use schools, teachers, governors, and of course the learners. Everybody operates protecting their safety as they engage in those teaching and learning processes. So those priorities constitute, as we would see it, top-down from the education sector carried by the DBE. There are targets that are carried at a national level, and we will illuminate the ones that we have dovetailed into our annual performance plan for 25-26. As we go on to the strategic priorities, I'll ask my SG just to illuminate the salient points on our approach to redefining and updating our vision statements and our impact statements for the term ahead, and I'll take the cue from that again, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abrams. So, Chairperson, just in terms of us looking at all those priorities, cascading all those priorities, sense making of it, and then putting that into what are we actually going to do. We started with, we confirmed, given all that, we're still confirming that our vision is quality education for every child, in every classroom, in every school in the province. And clearly we're a growing system with a few challenges, but a laser-like focus on the question of quality education. It becomes very important that we don't lose focus on that, because those are the things that are going to give our children the pathways to be able to do great things for themselves, hopefully great things for our country, and hopefully great things for the world. Our mission is that every child has a quality learning opportunity in a functional and enabling environment to acquire the knowledge, the competencies, and the skills and values to succeed in a changing world. We intend to empower every learner with quality education skills and opportunities to thrive in a rapidly evolving world, to foster innovation, resilience, and inclusivity within our education system. And so when we took all of that into account for the period, this term, we're looking at 3 strategic priorities, and it builds on things that we have done before. But the first is we maintain that we have to strengthen the foundations in learning. cannot build a house from a roof, Chairperson. It's got to be built from the foundation. And basically, using that almost metaphor, we have put a lot of effort into making sure that the foundation of learning is strong. And obviously, I think the members would be aware that as from this year, grade R is also included in our basket. And so we put a lot of effort into making sure that the grade R and foundations of learning are solid. Then the purpose of education, obviously, to look at how we can improve our learning outcomes. Many programs to try and see how we can improve the learning outcomes and equip learners with a skill set that they can actually operate in a rapidly evolving world. And in order to make sure that we can actually deliver this level of education, we have to ensure that we develop the suitable infrastructure. That's not only physical infrastructure, but it will be things like books, desks, anything that's required to actually make sure the child can actually learn inside the classroom. And then we also understand that we are a big player inside education, but we are not the only player inside education. And so partnerships with local organizations, but also other provinces, also national government, anybody who's working inside the sector, to be able to make sure that we can actually have an impact. There's a saying in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think the approach of the department is to cooperate with whoever will assist us in that village to raise their child. So with that having been said, I'm going to hand back to Mr. Abrams and he can just take us through some of the outcomes. Thank you.
Chair, having sketched the backdrop and the context of the operational environment, an assumption we carry, of course, it will continue to be a strained environment, fiscally constrained environment, but also one where we encounter numerous service delivery pressures. We will continue to think about effective resource allocation and moving our very scarce resources to where it can make the biggest impact in our efforts to build a more equitable, resilient, and effective system. We have had the benefit and draw on a baseline assessment that we've had the benefit of receiving support from the World Bank on in the few months prior to the development of this plan. It's a sector analysis that does provide a more comprehensive picture of the education sector in this province. And in its purpose, it aimed to inform the prioritization of our policy actions and our reforms that will improve access, but also importantly, improve the quality of the education that those children who are able to access in the system, that they receive a better standard of education. So we were determined, in addition to down selecting on a select three priorities, as we moved into the space of improving learning outcomes, stimulating the development of actionable strategies, the key question was, for what would we do in a fiscally constrained environment? Where would we mobilize resources? And as we acknowledge that access will continue to dominate, it will be a growing system for the foreseeable future. The focus had, in a nuanced way, shifted onto how do we improve our particular learning outcomes. And so the extended benefit of that deeper dive from a sector analysis would have had us focus on the determinants of learning, getting into the classroom, understanding the relationship between the teacher, the learner, and the curriculum. And so as we acknowledge that what matters most for economic growth is, of course, skills development. In other words, what the child learns as opposed to how long they're in school for, we knew that we needed to be more incisive on producing better outcomes, and that will involve growing the knowledge base and imparting skills on our teachers. So on the slide at the moment are 6 strategic outcomes that we've defined in our strategic plan that hangs as a backdrop to our year-on-year plan. As illuminated earlier, there's a broad acknowledgement that the sooner you start, the better. Increased access to the ECD programs emerged as a key outcome to focus on for this term. The nuance there being that it's both increasing access as well as improving the quality and strengthening the quality of ECD provision. We have a 60% coverage rate of ECD in different ways, center-based and non-center-based in the province. Of course, we would move that up to maximum coverage, but understanding currently what are the factors that impact on access and the factors that impact on quality, we have determined a need to focus some work to the extent we can on that particular program. So that's the first outcome. Outcomes 2 and 3 are interwoven. I've spoken about the need to improve learning outcomes across grades, and we recognize the roles, of course, that our teachers play. Improving and enhancing teaching effectiveness is front of mind. It's a very difficult, it's a systemic challenge, Chair, for our teachers to manage and teach mixed ability classrooms, large mixed ability. Post-COVID, we've seen quite a broadening of the array of ability and skill levels within a classroom. So not between schools that may have relatively more resources than the next. We're seeing diversity of performance in the same school and in the same classroom, and that makes it very difficult for our teachers. And so the focus on teachers is important. There are 4 entry points. The new pipeline of teachers, how do we support and induct those teachers into the space? As I said, improving teaching effectiveness, improving the conditions under which teachers work, of course, as well. And then in an appropriate way, enhancing our performance management in that context as well for all educators and non-educators. On the right-hand side are 6 outcomes that we'd expect to find in a system as large as the education system in the Western Cape. In terms of that footprint, it's been growing at 2.5% at the moment, and we've been trying to, in our best attempts to expand the base of resources, teachers, infrastructure, etc. But we've been doing that in a responsible way, and we will continue to focus on promoting sound corporate governance and accountability as we expand the system and improve its quality. Infrastructure remains a focus area. We've made measurable advances in the last term, and we carry that focus as a strategic focus area and an outcome to target with honors, as government ourselves, but also in partnership with others to improve school infrastructure and facilities. And then a necessary and priority context for us is to promote social cohesion, given our reach into communities and to the multiplicity of stakeholders that we reach. So that Chair has its own 5-year medium-term frame in guiding our policy actions and the targets we'd have set over the term. As we then break that down into the annual performance targets. So as we reflect on the current budgets in the MTEF, our current opportunities that are near term, and we balance that with the service delivery risks and pressures, we would have emerged with a set of targets that are more near term, that would have us allocate fundings already and produce more defined and specific action plans. And in that regard, I'd like to ask my colleague, Ms. Musa, just to take us through. Not all of them necessarily, unless, Chair, at your discretion, we're happy to come back and do a deeper dive on any one of these indicators, but just to talk to, at a programmatic level, how we will demonstrate accountability in mapping the budgets and our operational plans to these particular governance plans.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Allow me to walk you through this committee through our key performance indicators and targets for 25-26. The focus of the annual performance plan is basically implements constitutional mandate through our 7 programs. It draws from the World Bank Sector Analysis Report. It includes 55 indicators, of which 28 are provincial indicators, 22 sector indicators, and 5 MTDP indicators. It changes lives of youth by building knowledge, skills, and capabilities, so that is our intention. Furthermore, let's examine our specific provincial indicators for each program. Yeah, next one. In terms of program 1, I'll just give broadly, it will be, our aim is to look at 100% of schools visited twice yearly for monitoring and support, 85% of schools with required management documents, 70% of schools with contingency plans, 70% of SGB meetings, governance functionality criteria, 100% of textbooks delivered when ordered online, and 5,000 instances of ICT integration training. Moving on to program 2 and 3, we're looking at technology infrastructure that encompasses the 32 schools with new lands, 80 subject-specific computer lab refreshes, 500 smart classrooms, 2,850 grade 12 learners in technical agricultural subjects. And then with program 3, 40% of registered independent schools monitored. Then we'll look at our targets for inclusive education and early childhood development, which is our program 4 and 5. We're looking at inclusive education, so 635 learning support teachers in public schools providing support, 128 schools supported by inclusive education teams, 2020 year 4 learners in school of skills curricula within the early childhood development domain, 71% grade 1 learners who receive formal grade R, 765 fully registered ECD facilities. Then going over to infrastructure and learning outcomes are also our key priorities. Then in terms of infrastructure, 4 new schools completed, 138 new classrooms provided, learning outcomes in terms of grade 3, 43.5% in language. The next slide. Learning outcomes, grade 3 for math, 41.4%. Grade 9, language and math is 52.6% and then 21.5%. Grade 12, 19% achieving distinctions and 25,000 total distinctions. We also track the standardized indicators across the sector. Officially, the sector is not standardized, but the department still included the sector indicators for 25-26. In terms of program 1 and 2, all schools using SASAMs or electronic data systems, which is in our case is CMIS. No fee schools and learner subsidies is the area of the SRIs in those particular programs. In programs 2 and 3, teacher training in reading, numeracy, maths, and language. Then independent school subsidies and learners receiving subsidies. And then programs 4, 5, and 6, specialized education and therapist provision, grade R offerings and ECD programs, and maintenance projects as well. Then lastly, program 7, NEC pass rate target of 87%, bachelor pass target of 48%, and finally, our alignment with the national NTDP indicators. So basically within that scope, it is school community engagements to combat discrimination, inclusion of learners with disabilities, children accessing ECD programs, and children benefiting from ECD subsidies, schools offering previously marginalized languages. Then Chairperson and members, allow me to hand over to Ishi, to DDG planning. Thank you.
Chair, before I pass to the HOD to conclude, it is quite a rapid walkthrough. Again, more than happy to pause on a particular program or on a particular set of target indicators. The relevant context, of course, is these are, of course, on an ongoing continuum. We would share, as appropriate, the baselines of where we start this term at. For example, on learning outcomes, we are uniquely positioned in measuring not just the advancements or the progress in improving numeracy and literacy at the foundation phase, but we also we have the benefit of understanding the impact that COVID had created a few years ago and what our progress has been as regards recovering those learning losses. Of course, the interventions that had been programmed and will continue to be a feature into this particular term, programs like Back on Track, has had measurable positive impact. And so what we are intending to do is, of course, we can share in the context of these targets where we're starting from and how ambitious those targets are. We'll need that understanding of the kind of trajectory that we expect given these current operating conditions. How good could it get in terms of recovering learning losses given the resources at our disposal? That's an appropriate next order conversation. Hanim had alluded to those latter residual, I call it residual, but they are the MTDP targets that didn't find its way at a programmatic level into our APP. The learning outcomes are threaded in to program 7, for example, the access to ECD into programs 3 and inclusive education 4 and 5, and where there were additional higher order transcendental targets, she's included that as a reference point. In the context of social cohesion, we take the particular challenges, which would be not new, but it will need us to focus our resources on things like, for example, the promotion and the protection of languages through curriculum implementation that have an additional programmatic consideration for colleagues in the WCED, And the other one is, of course, protecting the vulnerable, protecting in the inclusive education context, making sure that as we expand the system and promote quality, that we do include all of our learners with special needs and those that are particularly vulnerable in a poverty context. In terms of concluding remarks, the intent had been to share the extent to which the department's APP, the annual one-year plan, dovetails into the strategic priorities and plans of the department for the term 2025-2030. It had briefly referenced the links back to the provincial government and, of course, the sectoral and the national priorities and goals. But we are very clear and we are very committed. Our strategic plan, Chair, highlights an ongoing commitment to providing quality education for every child in every classroom, in every school in the Western Cape. Every decision that we'll take in relation to education will be informed by a deeper understanding of the factors that impact on learning outcomes and building on what works in terms of improving learning outcomes. And so as we endeavor to create a more equitable system, we'll be driven by a more expansive and a more rigorous use of the data at our disposal. As I said, we've got learner outcome data. We believe we can do more to share it and to mine it for its opportunities. And our interest as an apex priority is to improve learning outcomes and provide a better learning experience for all our learners. The department continues to dedicate itself to the objectives that's contained within the plan, both the strategic 5-year, medium-term one, as well as the annual one. And our vision, as ambitious as it is, transformative as it is, will be progressively realized. We have taken an attitude of urgency, is the point I would like to make humbly, Chair. We recognize the urgency. We are endeavoring to find the financial and technical assistance where we can get it in order to create and achieve those particular outcomes. And we will, as we would have found in this particular forum, continue to be guided and directed by the oversight work of this committee. I'll hand to my Chair, to our HOD to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abrams. So, Chairperson, maybe just, we've given you the whole cascade, how we actually fit into the various plans. We also, inside this presentation, articulated the measurements that we're going to make to see whether we almost winning in this game, to put it in that way. But I think we need to just understand that at the heart of it, education is about helping individuals become the best version of themselves. I think that's worth repeating. Education is about helping individuals become the best versions of themselves. Obviously, individuals all have different skill sets, they have different abilities, and we have to almost be a catch-all for all these differently able abilities. And so what we try to sketch here today is to say to you that those indicators that we've indicated in the presentation, they are dipsticks to say, are we actually winning or not? And we believe that if we can meet those indicators targets that we set for ourselves, that gives us an indication that we're on track to helping learners to become the best versions of themselves. Ultimately, our impact has to be around empowering every learner with good quality education skills and opportunities to thrive in a changing world. And I think that's the challenge that we have. Learners come from very many different backgrounds, varied backgrounds. We have to make sense of that, turn it into something that learners can hold on to, use, and climb out of any situation to be able to see further than any of us have ever seen before. So, Chair, that's our presentation. It gives you an overview, and I guess from the departmental officials, we can take questions. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Only the Minister wants to.
Thank you very much, HOD and team. Minister, I don't know if you have any remarks at this stage.
I think the department have provided a good summary of the two documents, and we stand ready to take questions.
Thank you. I think, just to test the education system as such, I think I'm going to ask the standing committee members to give us at least each one to give us 3 different KPIs that have been given to us here, just to test your abilities. But I think if we can probably take questions now. I think, the one aspect that I just think of in going through what we have here is naturally just to look at how KPIs have perhaps been changed over recent times as a result of the work that's been done, for instance, on Back on Track, and being influenced by the World Bank sector analysis. That, probably one area of thought. And I think over to members for any questions that you may have or comments that you have. I see Member Christians, Member Said. Okay, you can go. Go ahead, Member Christian.
No, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the department. Chair, this is a lot, and I think we'll have to break it down again. I think it's a lot of material that we must work through and worked through, but I don't think it's going to be justice. It's going to go through everything. It's going to be too long. But I just want to maybe just throw this out in the just to test the HOD said, you cannot start building at the roof. So I just want to use that scenario because some of the buildings are at the roof, but there's a lot of holes in it that you must fix, right? So that is my question is, and I know you were talking about, and we all agree that we must build strong from the foundation. The previous meeting that we had, I had an issue with the ECDs that's not all located at the schools. And I know it's going to be expensive, but I still believe, and I was answered, but the people, the ECDs at schools and the ECDs not in schools, I don't believe that they get the same quality of education. That already is the first discrepancy, is the first problem that I see. The second one is that not all of our learners go to grade R. Those I believe there's still those that go straight away to grade 1, and that's what I'm talking about. Holes in the windows. We're starting at the bottom, but the bottom must be solid, must be right. Otherwise, you're going to fix, but your foundation on it. So that is maybe a concern that I have, and that we look at building strong. So what are you doing to make sure that our learners that must receive quality education, and that is, that's the vision of the educational department. I'm not going through all of that quality education to every child in every classroom and every school, but what is the department doing to ensure that the children attending ECDs is getting the same quality education if it's at the school or not at the school? Because the last time that we engaged, you said it's not practical bringing them all to school. I think that would have been most probably the best scenario, but it's not practical at the moment because of financial constraints. That's the answer you gave me last time. But I'm just saying, what are you doing to ensure that they get the same quality education on that grade R? I just want to throw that out, but just to ask the other question is, it's all, the problem that I also have when you go to the township schools, not every learner have the opportunity to enroll for the subjects of choice. That's not available. So when you're at a particular school, you cannot, I want to become something, but the subjects that I must do is not aligned to what I need to study because it's not available at that school that I'm enrolled at. And I think that is maybe also where we're going wrong, because when a child matriculates, they cannot find a job, or they cannot go study further because of that problem that you have. And, the schools that I visited, I don't know, everybody is doing tourism because they want to get good results at the end of the day. So bulk of the people is doing tourism, and it's because schools want to, schools want to say, we've improved our matric pass rate. But it's useless because half or three-quarter of the school is doing tourism. Chairperson, I'm going to stop there. There's a lot here, but I'm going to give some of the members opportunity to ask. If there's opportunity, I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Christians. Member Sayed, then
Chair.
Member Van Minen.
Thank you very much. Chair, just before I commence, maybe if Wasima could just check. I received some messages via my office that there are some media and members of the public that were still in the waiting room on the. So I don't know whether they've now entered. Just wanted to, if that can just be checked. So that. Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Chair. And let me again welcome the presentation by the department led by the MEC and the HOD. And I want to, I think, just following up, building on Member Christian's input around the ECDs or his questions around the ECDs, because I think it makes up an important aspect of the presentation, especially as we go towards a focus of the outcomes, because I think many times we're focusing on the symptoms of issues, which is important, but the outcomes, growth, economic growth in the province, job creation, this should be the ultimate aim of education here in the Western Cape. And I think I'm glad with that type of emphasis. But just with regards to the ECD facilities, I just wanted to get a sense as to how many ECD facilities are currently operating in the province. And of those, how many are fully registered? Because we often find that the unregistered ones, that's where we tend to have the various challenges. And then linked to that, what kind of support is the department providing to the unregistered ECD centers to assist with the registration process at this moment in time? And then part of that is, in the presentation, it says that there are 765 fully registered ECD facilities, but only 42 registered ECD programs. To what do we owe that particular discrepancy? I just wanted to get a sense of that. And then infrastructure related to the ECD facilities. Is there a target number for the amount of ECD facilities that the province aims to build or upgrade in the 2025-2026 financial year, in line with the president's, we're speaking about the alignment to the strategic framework, in line with the president of the country's focus that was stated in the State of the Nation address this year. Then also, can the 42 registered ECD programs realistically accommodate the target of children that are expected to basically access these ECDs by the 2025-2026 financial year? And then my final one on the ECDs linked to the subsidies, and I'll get into grade R and that in the other questions, is the presentation indicates, Chair, that there are 55,057 children that are basically accessing the programs, the ECD programs. Yet we find that a smaller number are benefiting from the subsidies. Could the department perhaps clarify why there is this gap? Thank you. I'll get into other, if there's time for other aspects later.
Fine. Thank you, Member Sayed. Member Van Minen.
Thank you very much. I suspect my question is really framed in the negative. On slide 21, where it talks about the number of public schools that use the South African School Administration and Management System, and the number of public schools that can be contacted electronically, both of them sitting at 1,542. My question is, are there any schools in the province that fall outside of that? So essentially, are there any schools that can't be contacted via email and that don't use the system? Thank you.
Fine, thanks. I think we'll take that as the round of questions, then we'll come back. And then, Minister and HOD, if you could respond there.
Thank you, Chairperson. As per usual, I'll hand over to Brent Walters and the team, and I may come back at the end.
I think, HOD, I think some of these questions were multiple choice questions. So maybe you just need to indicate whether it's A, B, C, or D.
That's fine.
Or E.
That's fine. Thank you, Chairperson. We will answer it as a team as best we can. I just want to maybe clarify one point, which I think there may be a misunderstanding from the committee. What we presented in the numbers are the targets that we are aiming to get to. They don't necessarily indicate what the coverage is. These are two different things. Do need to indicate that, because I think if we say that that's a target, that would be informed by many things, our ability to get to where we need to be, our budget, and so on. And obviously, with education, you can always do better. It's continuous improvement. You can always do better. So I thought I should say that. If Sally can maybe just talk about the KPIs, and there was a question about the World Bank. If you could, Sally, you could maybe just try and answer that. I think what Ellen will answer the questions about ECD. But remember what I do want to say about ECD. So we've taken the correct decision to emphasize a sector that requires elevation. However, this is an ongoing thing. Remember, public schooling first was grade 1 to grade 12. Now it includes grade R. You work your way backwards to ECD. The resources have remained the same. There's small amounts of increases that we have received. And what we have shown in this presentation is the intention to obviously encompass every child should get into ECD. But we of course know, in fact, by one of the things that we indicated that we haven't reached every child. There was a question about grade R, for example, every child who has presented and said, I want to be in grade R, they have been placed. But the question that was asked is, have we covered every child? We don't know the answer to that, because there are parents who perhaps haven't brought their children to grade R. Maybe the idea that grade R is now compulsory hasn't yet developed inside the system. But we of course know that every child who is 5 turning 6 should be in a grade R class. I think the commitment of the department is to say that if a child presents 5 turning 6 to be placed in some grade R environment, we will make a plan to place that child in a grade R environment. Bertram can perhaps just answer the question about the subject choices that Mr. Christians asked. And Bertram will tell you there are, I may have the number wrong now, but I think there are 65 subject choices. But I do want to point out that the curriculum from grade R to grade 9 is the same for everybody. It's the subject choices that then come after that, Chairperson, that are then made. But from grade R to grade 9, the overwhelming majority of the system, subjects are the same. It's when they must make the choices for the FET phase that various decisions then get made based on their ability, based on what the school offers, based on various, many things. And obviously the options for learners, they take those decisions in consultation with their parents, their community, and their teachers inside that school. And so not every learner, for example, depending where they find themselves, depending on the choices that that school and that environment and that governing body has actually made for that school. So these are the subjects we're actually going to offer. Not every learner, may miss out on various things as we go forward in relation to that. There were lots of questions about the ECDs. And again, the only thing I want to say about them, Mr. Mayor will talk a little bit about the ECDs and where we are. I think the key thing that I just perhaps wanted to say is that on the numbers we have shown, I just want to emphasize that there are targets for the department in terms of the annual performance plan. That's what we want to achieve. They certainly don't have the universal coverage. And it's progressive realization of ECD over time. In grade R, obviously, we have the immediate realization. So any child who does present, we obviously will do that. And in the ECD space, it's about formalizing, especially in the informal spaces, to be able to give them the tools to run quality ECD programs. In other words, moving out of just warehousing, I'm sorry to use that word, but just where we just take care of children, to a thing where we get quality for those children and giving them a skill set that they can actually, become the best version of themselves. So I'm going to ask perhaps my colleagues, maybe starting with Sally, to add anything, and then Ellen, you can, and Bertram, if there's anything I perhaps left out, you can maybe just add. Thank you.
Say it.
Apologies, before they respond on the ECD, I realized, and I may have just turned the words around. I made a bit of an error in posing one question on the ECD. So just it will help them. It was just to say I indicated firstly that the issue around when I said in the presentation about the 55,000 children that are accessing, and I said yet a smaller number are benefiting. It's supposed to be a larger number are benefiting. So I wanted to know, it makes quite a significant difference. So I just wanted to get a sense of the discrepancy. Thank you.
Chair, I'll address some of the questions that were asked. The first is your own. To what extent would the KPIs and the output indicators have been informed or influenced by either the interventions, such as Back on Track, or indeed the sector analysis that the World Bank had did? So on the timeline of developing this, I'd set two contextual statements. One is we had down selected on a priority to focus on improving learning outcomes. That had been an acute focus for the department. So when the World Bank did its analysis, it didn't evaluate our programs such as Back on Track. It had made the case that if we were investing the amounts of monies that we were putting into the education system, are we getting the outputs? And if we are not, why might that be? And there are issues of efficiency. I mean, we can think about, are we allocating enough monies in the right places? And so that has been very pragmatic, very practical, and very focused. The minister, amongst others, the HOD, had driven that piece of work to focus more acutely on what's happening in the classroom. And so the attention to detail around what are the determinants of learning, what are the determinants of the learning outcomes that we're getting, and specifically the relationship between the teacher, the learner, and the classroom. Whilst it didn't impact and change the KPIs, it had imposed, the World Bank analysis had been very clear that we need to set bold targets in that regard, and had prescribed very practical recommendations around where we would need to focus. And our focus acutely is in the classrooms with the teachers and the support to teachers. And obviously, as we think about very technical matters like a structured pedagogy, the how to, in terms of recognizing the diversity in the system, how do you reach a child, that would need particular support? And our curriculum colleagues have tuned into that feedback. So we are confident about our targets, because we are more confident about our interventions that will hopefully see that progress. And as we move through this 5-year plan, we expect that we are going to see the impact of our interventions. The most pronounced of that is Back on Track. So we had not had the benefit of this data, the evaluation that had been done on the first sets of interventions around learners and teachers that the Back on Track program brought. Both learner and teacher interventions were positive in the way that it contributed in different ways to recovering learning losses. And we had looked at using international benchmarks. They aren't available just yet, but we used our own systemic tests, and our external research team would have validated that there is a positive support. So it's not enough to change the targets, but the ambition that comes through with being more confident about pronouncing more bold targets, we do think we have the right program focus endorsed by those programs and those stakeholders. In terms of I'll just touch on the KPI, the indicators in itself. Some of them are ambitious in the way that we are also still baselining and getting better data on what is out there, particularly in the ECD space. I mean, we've been extensive and comprehensive in our focus on getting to every private run facility, every center-based activity. And to the question specifically around are there targets in the infrastructures, and my colleagues will talk about the relationship between facilities and programs, but on facilities, we've had to, in fact, check across all the municipalities and mobilize the conditional grant funding we got. It's 8 million in last year, for example, it's 16 million in this year. What's the best use of that money? And so we haven't targeted new facilities just yet, but we have targeted upgrading and improving the ones we have, because some of them are not compliant. They don't create conducive spaces for teaching and learning specifically. And they do other things, and nurturing and caring, but they are not environments that one would expect to deliver quality education. And so we've mobilized our infrastructure, and the way that plays out in the targets is classrooms built, upgrades completed, as opposed to standalone new ECD facilities in a sense. And then it's just one other question I'd like to touch on. I mean, I'll make my statement, my point about the baseline data. Assessing quality is the next order kind of activity after figuring out how many ECD facilities registered and non-registered are out there. And there's a lot of focus around getting them compliant and registered. But there are also there's also good focus and interventions around improving quality. And getting better data on not the infrastructure, but everything else, quality of the programs, the human resources, etc. That's an ongoing exercise. And so, again, not enough data yet to have us change our position on some of the targets on an annual basis, but we expect going forward to see those inputs coming into our planning processes. Thank you. You want to comment on that 55,000? No?
Thank you, Chairperson. Mine is just on the subject choices. I think, Mr. Christians, is that subject choices lies in the ambit of the school governing bodies. And I think that is the challenge that we are facing, because we have to engage them if we want to change the subject offerings that the school has. But what we are busy with is a spatial analysis to see what the schools look like within the specific community, to look at different pathways as well as articulation ways, because we also have to involve the TVET colleges in this process to actually give our learners different pathways post grade 9 to actually move in, and in that way give learners the opportunity to become part of either entrepreneurs, part of the world of work, or actually go into the universities. But currently the situation is, I think, about 96% of our learners are doing the academic subjects in our system. And I think that is the narrative that we would like to change over time. How we do it is through our career clubs that we try to implement at all our high schools. And the reason for our career clubs, the difference between what you'll mostly find in a challenging community and a community where a middle class community, if I can use that word, is that there's limited reference points in a challenging community. Learners don't have people that they can reference. Who's the lawyer? Who's the doctor? Who's that? Those are the challenges that we have, and those are the things that we would like to change through the career clubs, to expose them to different ways of thinking and also to understand what else is out there in the world. That's the one. The third point that I want to make on this is that we're also busy with an entrepreneurship mindset that we have to change, because it's not only the articulation into TVET colleges, the world of work, or universities, but also becoming entrepreneurs that will change the landscape of the provinces. So if you put that into play, that's what we are trying to push into the system now from a very early age, to make that change and transition in the FET phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to follow on what Mr. Lariston is indicating, it is practically not possible to offer the same subject packages at a number of schools in the same area. So therefore specialization, also because of the resource that we have. So with the restricted number, for example, of Afrikaans teachers at the moment, where we're finding it difficult to find an Afrikaans teacher, it has impact on what a school is actually able to offer as well. And so it's also about the training that is coming out of university, people who have been trained about the offering that they have and bring into the system that is also sometimes restrictive for schools. You can imagine that in a rural area that becomes even more difficult because you'll find maybe 2 applications for the principal's post in a rural area. If we take a place like Vredendal, for example, you may get 4 applications for the principal's post, whereas in the metro, you may find 100 people applying for the same post. So it's also about the locality as to where people would prefer to settle that impacts even on those particular numbers. Chairperson, I want to just note the questions from Member Christians, Member Sayed, etc. So if you look at ECD, and I think sometimes we still get it a little bit confused when we talk about ECD. ECD is 3 to the age of 4 and early 5s, because then they're going to grade R after that. So we still lump it together. We say ECD. We must start separating and talk about grade R learners, and we talk about ECD as before that. And so currently we have in the region of 1,534 registered centers, of which 752 are fully subsidized from our side, and there's about 782 that receive conditional kind of funding from our side. There are also 50 non-center based facilities. That is where learners go in for a certain amount of hours at the local municipal facility. They go in, they have a workshop there with the children, and then they go back home again, or they go to the auntie or to the granny that they're living with. The number of children currently, Chairperson, is 61,466 in the full funded centers that we have. We've also have about 53,616 in the conditional centers, and then at the non-center based, we've got about 14,897 learners. So there's a sizable number of over 100, I'd say about 120,000 learners within that particular sector, and they, for example, are catered for on a daily basis. We have social sector organizations that support us in managing clusters of centers. So they are allocated a number of centers who they provide administrative support to, also training, etc. That is provided by the SSO to those particular centers. The grade R, at the moment, we have about 334 independent grade R facility as member Christians. And to some extent, you may be correct. But what we are trying to do, and on Saturday past, we had our first big grade R conference and workshop at the CTLI, where the HOD hosted the proceedings there for the day, where we invited all the grade R teachers to that facility of ours to do a training intervention with them, and also gathering information on various aspects related to grade R. We had over 1,000 teachers present on Saturday, and then splitting into various subcomponents for in-depth discussion around grade R matters. And so that's our first attempt to get the teachers on the same page. We've also asked our subject advisory service, particularly in the foundation phase, to also support ECD centers with the kind of support, around grade R, those who are offering grade R, to be part of that program, to ensure that there's a standard curriculum that is implemented for grade R, whether it is independent, whether it is WCD, the same must be offered in those particular centers. We also pride ourselves in that we've also provided funding for people to do training in ECD, and particularly also in grade R, for people to go to the TVET colleges to attend various courses to gain a qualification in order to become qualified and to be considered for permanent staff members on our side as well within the grade R facilities. And so we have made bursaries available to a number of people over the years to do these courses, to be part of that particular program. Then, Chairperson, you'll notice that within the targets for this year, we've indicated a number of learning programs for ECD. So at the moment, the learning programs in ECD is written in a way that says, the legislation written says that the program must be reevaluated every year. Now, it's not practically possible. If we must review and have caps certified every year, you can understand the chaos that will exist. So we're looking at changing policy around that, so that the learning program for an ECD remains for a longer period of time, and we then work with the children. The program is really given to say that at this time of the morning, the learners must do this. So it's a daily program for learners within the ECD center, because as we're aware, children want a structured day. They want a program that says you're going to be outside in the field for this time, you're going to come back into the class, do these activities, then it's fine motor, then it's gross motor, then it's relaxation time, feeding time, etc. And the children have a program for the day which they have to adhere to. Those learning programs, we're saying there's 38. There are many, many more in the field currently. But we want to certify those courses to ensure that the learners actually get a very good quality kind of experience within the center that focuses on the fine motor skills, the gross motor skills, etc., so that when the child comes to grade R, a lot of the fundamentals are already in place for that child to do that. Just to give you a little bit of a further insight, members, we've also looked at the CIAS process, which identifies learners with additional requirements and special needs in education. And we've already started the process of looking at the ECD centers already to say, well, as this child is entering the ECD, is this child at risk? For example, is the child on the spectrum, autism spectrum? Does the child show malnutrition or stunting? And we can then identify the child earlier, develop an intervention program for the child so that then provides the child with an opportunity to potentially perform better when they reach formal education at grade R, grade 1, etc. And we'll already have, accommodations in place, before the child even reaches the formal school sector. I think it was clarified by Member Sayed in terms of the programs and the number of facilities. The number of facilities is unrelated to the number of programs. It's the learning programs that was being identified there, and that is what I have also just explained. We are currently busy with the Banapele program of where we're going out to find out where the ECD facilities are. They must register. We go through the process of registering them. We have to unfortunately clarify and say, we're registering you, but we're not necessarily registering you for funding. We're going to assist you to go to the municipality to get the fire clearance, etc., the sign off from the city for approval of the facility. We'll assist people with that, but we cannot say that once you registered, we're now going to fund. There's a different process that still has to kick in. The idea is to find all of the sites within the province so that we actually know where the children are, so that we could also go to those centers and say, here is a learning program which you can apply. So for example, we're working very closely with the Hanley Rupert Trust, who has developed a learning program already for grade R. And it's free and available to anybody to utilize. It's paid for, and we can make copies of it. There's no copyright, etc. And we can actually put that into our schools as well. There's a lot of other programs that's available, but also come at a very high cost. And so therefore, we're looking at high quality programs that are free and available to these centers and putting it into those centers as well. So that, Chair, is some of the questions around the ECD. And then just in terms of schools being contacted electronically, where schools are unable to link into our LAN or our wide area network, we do provide funding to the school to get access via another API or company that provides internet services, ICT broadband company. They can get a data card and they can link up with a data card to connect to the internet to provide the information. There are some, of course, as you know, certain areas where Wi-Fi signal is very bad, and the HOD will tell you of principals who have to drive up the hill in the Kowa Bokkeveld to be able to connect to the network and then sit on their laptop and then send the information to us. But in technically, all our schools are connected. It's just by different means that they are connected. I thought I'd just clarify that for you. Thanks.
Thank you. Just 3 comments from myself. I do agree with Furlong Christians that this is a lot, and we'll dig into these documents, I'm sure, not just over the year, but possibly over the term. I also agree with the Honourable Khalid Sayed. I do agree that the ultimate outcome, which I think we've got to increasingly focus on, of course, is economic growth and employment. And that's why increasingly, I think, when we think about particularly basic education, we've got to understand that an investment in basic education is an investment in long-term economic growth and employment. I do also want to remind members that, of course, the National Minister of Finance will tomorrow table the third iteration of the budget. And you will recall that in that budget, there is an additional provisional, I emphasize provisional, appropriation for basic education, part of which was originally earmarked for the early learning environment, ECD and grade R. And a big question for tomorrow is whether that provisional additional allocation will hold or not. If it does, it will certainly put us in a much better position to expand access in the ECD environment. But of course, all eyes will be on the National Minister of Finance tomorrow afternoon.
Thanks, Minister and HOD. Next round of questions. Fine, Member Christian, and then we'll take from other members.
Just a follow-up, Chair, and thank you for the answers. That is exactly what I wanted to know. When you look at the grade R curriculum, if it's independent or WCED, it must be standardized. If the department can just maybe tell us, Mr. Mayor mentioned, that meeting with teachers. When do you see you'll get to at least, because I'm speaking of experience, Chair, and that's why I'm highlighting it. I didn't go to those days we call it the creche, and if you go straight to grade 1, sub A in our days, you have a tremendous, those children are clever. You'll think they're more clever than you, but because they received the training in grade R, they read better. It took me some time to catch up. So I'm speaking about experience, and that's why I'm talking about standardized, even if it's WCED or independent institution, that we just make sure that the children are on the same level. So if they can tell us, how far, I think that program must be pursued vigorously in order to make sure that our learners are on the same level. Just the other question also about, I know we spoke about the subject choices, and we're talking about after when you must make choices. We know we got the same subjects, but we get to a certain point, and the department will agree with me, you do not have the same opportunity, but to become whatever I want to become, because it's limited to that area that I stay in. And I do not make the decision as a learner, but other people, the school governing body makes that decision. But I need to go to another school, our environment, in order to become something in life that I want to pursue. So that is real. But the other question is, what is real? A lot of our learners is not academically inclined. That you answered the question. And they don't have those choices. They're going to not make a success with their life because there's not alternatives. They're better with their hands. They're better with other, and so I'm worried about that when I see our youngsters in the street. But the last thing, just a follow up, is career guidance is so important. I speak to matriculants and they don't know what they want to do next year. And not one, many of them. They're in matric and they don't know what they're going to do next year. They don't even know where they're going to enroll because they don't know what they're studying for. So career guidance is so important, Chair, to give direction, because we're talking about, people matriculate and have a purpose that I want to do something in my life, not I matriculate and that's achievement, because then we just getting people in the SASSA queues, going for grants and stuff. And we don't want to do that. We want people to contribute to the economy, because the parents and the education department has invested in these learners, and now they don't know what to do. So I'm talking about practical examples in the areas where I visit. So that's why I'm passionate about these things. But I also want to compliment the department for what they do. I mean, we have a lot of interaction. So I'm just saying this is what we feel, what we experience on a daily basis. That was follow-up, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Christians and Member Sayed.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was also just it's a follow-up or just for some clarity on the ECD matter, then I'll get into the others. So my sense is that, is it correct then for me to say that at this point, the department is still, in terms of getting the sense of the number of ECDs, it's still in the process of searching. And I just wanted to get that, whether, because we are also looking for additional allocation. I think it's going to make it a little bit challenging while we're still looking. I just wanted to get a sense of whether that is a yes or no, and then I'll get into the other questions.
Let's just find out if other members have got a question.
then
Here
I've got
stage. Yeah. Member Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know what steps is the department taking to make sure resources like infrastructure, upgrades and learner transport are fairly distributed, especially in the under-resourced or rural areas. And then on slide 15, the presentation mentions insight from the World Bank's education sector analysis. How is that research being used to improve how schools are run and how learners perform? And then lastly, what are the biggest hurdles the department sees in rolling out this plan? And what's being done to manage or avoid those risks, especially when it comes to training teachers and keeping our schools safe? Thank you.
Thank you. Member Sayed, you want to add?
Yes, thank you very much. This goes linked in a sense to the ECDs, but not entirely. Infrastructure planning. There's a section on strategic infrastructure planning. Just wanted to get number one. Our office is often inundated on requests, maybe because there's been a success with it. The schools of skills. Just wanted to know what plans are in place to ensure that we expand in that regard, particularly in the rural areas in the Western Cape. Then, just with regards to the infrastructure developments being aligned with the need for expanded ECDs and grade R access, and get a sense with regards to that in infrastructure. Then infrastructure linked to another point, which I really welcome, the public-private partnerships. There's many private institutions that do have the funding and that want to establish schools in poor and working class communities. Can we just get a sense as to and many a times the bottlenecks are there with the municipalities, just so that these institutions can access land and they can fund. I just wanted to get a sense as to what efforts are being made in that regard to ensure that we have a proper environment and that the bureaucratic bottlenecks are overcome to ensure that NGOs that do have resources and want to invest can actually be part and parcel of establishment of some of these schools in our communities, because that will assist with regards to the backlog around the learners that are not placed. And they can provide scholarships and those. It's not that they will need financial assistance from the department. Just wanted to get that sense. Then it's also tied, and perhaps with it's linked to the municipalities. I mean, I visited last week and Friday Sinako High School in Khayelitsha. Again, issues around water and electricity. And I know we're supposed to have that particular meeting, Chair, where we bring some of the municipalities in the same room as the department, because often we find there's a the department wants to assist, but the municipalities are singing another tune. Can we ensure, is there a way to ensure that at least we can move on the same page in that regard? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I think at this stage I'll hand over, but just adding to what Member Christians was talking about career choices and also the mention about career clubs. surely we're also moving into the age now where one can have that online guidance of careers and videos and so forth, and that, you know, where the learners are being exposed to the choice of careers that are available that will then assist them in that subject choice matter, to perhaps alleviate some of these so-called easy choices of going the tourism route, and maybe they should be doing something else. So I think that was that, and then I was also just looking at the grade threes and the indicators that we have there in terms of the language and the maths and the reading and so forth, and the extent to which we're making progress in looking at those type of targets and indicators, given what we are finding by way of experience. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the water. So we're going to try and answer the questions as we go through them. Just if I can ask Mr. Lauriston if he can just prepare himself to just answer a little bit about career guidance. You know, what are the kinds of things that the department doing in the curriculum space? Because I am aware that there is work that takes place on career guidance inside that area. Of course, we know career guidance is also supposed to form part of life orientation as a subject. But I know the department is doing some things around career guidance. Mr. Sayed, just as far as the ECD question, you know, so remember, because our envelope of resources is not infinite, we also have to make choices. So this year, for example, we got the compulsory nature of grade R. So clearly, we had seen that coming. So early on already, maybe 2 years ago, maybe it's even 3 years, Chair, I have it wrong. But we already started to talk about the teacher code for grade R. Because in that space, you have people who are qualified, you have people who are underqualified, and you have people who are unqualified, they're completely unqualified. So then we started a program to try and get those people qualified. Now, why am I saying this, Mr. Said? The reason I'm saying that is because ECD is important, and it's a function that has been given to the department. To remember how we will work as a department is the envelope is finite. There are compulsory things we have to do for immediately realizable rights. At the moment, the immediately realizable right is from grade R up. That's not to say we're neglecting the ECD. All I'm saying is when faced with a choice of resources, obviously we can to first make sure that the grade R is solid, and now we're building backwards. The fact that we took over ECD from the Social Development Department, what it now means is that you can start to look beyond just satisfying basic needs of learners inside that space. To start to talk about, and that's what we're doing. Mr. Mayor in his section, Ruth, who's not here with us, but she'd be driving the programs that must take place in ECD, especially in the centers that's not based in a, let's just say, in a formal environment. So they're busy with that. But I think what I want to do, maybe just say, Mr. Sayed and Mr. Krishnan, because you asked similar kinds of questions. It's a building process for the department. The coverage isn't 100%, but it will get there eventually as we go on. And we've indicated our intention. And so, therefore, as Mr. Mayor has indicated, it's very important to get a package that is free, that we can tell an ECD center, let's say leader, whatever you call them, Mr. Mayor, listen, these are the activities you need to do with the kids. This is how much time you allocate to this, and so on. So we really, I think, on our way to that. If I can ask Mr. Abrams, we can maybe just answer some of the questions around infrastructure. There's questions about the World Bank, questions about the rural transport information. If we can just maybe answer that. And then, Mr. Mayor, you maybe want to talk about the schools of skills and potentially what are the almost expansions that we're doing there. But we do obviously see demand inside that area. And I'm not sure if we are able to answer the question about Senako School. If there's anybody who can answer that question, please do that. And then maybe to the chairperson's question, just on the grade 3. Remember, chairperson, we do grade 3, 6, and 9 systemic testing each year. And so it's an independent test, as of course you know, we have presented this to the committee before, but it is one of the few kinds of tests like that in the country. I mean, the only other exit exam in grade 12, you have that. But what these independent tests do is they are almost, it gives us an idea of whether we're winning the battles that children to read with meaning, for example, to be able to calculate and so on. So those grade 3, 6, and 9, the indicators are there inside our plans, because it tells us, are we actually winning or are we not winning? And clearly in that case, always try and raise the bar slightly higher, slightly higher, slightly higher all the time to be able to get to where we need to be. So I think I've covered most of it, but maybe we can start. Bertrand, do you want to perhaps just talk about the career stuff? Go from there.
Thank you, Shi. Yes, on the career clubs, I can just indicate, as I've already said, that we try to initiate at all our high schools, because if we do career guidance in grade 12, it's too late. That's the time where you actually show and tell, where you take them to open days and you expose them to different institutions. And you also have to engage them on financial assistance, because I think that is a part of career guidance that we lack, because we don't tell them what the options are of how to access those things, and you find them quite late. Even our top performing learners, we always, after the award ceremonies, try to see whether all our learners have been assisted, and mostly it is, I don't know yet where I'm going to with financial assistance, and that is part of that process. But I think the real career guidance happens lower down in grade 8 and 9. So what are we doing in grade 8 and 9? We are experimenting with the inclinations testing, which is an online testing that gives you abilities, your aptitude towards certain areas of interest, so that you have a self-discovery of what my interests are. The challenge with that is we don't have access to that information because of the POP here. So the learners have to allow us to access that information, but it gives them that tool is available to quite a few of our schools. And we are experimenting to see how best we can actually roll it out to all our schools. And then I think that will be also another level of assistance in the system that we have there. And then with regards to the resources, because I think as she indicated that career guidance is part of life orientations, but it's not the part of life orientation. And I think that is what we're also trying to shift towards, to say it's about career guidance. It's not about what subjects, it's about my vision and purpose in life that I would like to get there. And I think that, coupled with positive behavior within our lower grades, will give us the traction that is required to actually guide our learners better in the FET phase.
Chair, I'll address questions around the outcomes or the benefit of the sector analysis that the World Bank did, and I'll attempt to address the questions on the infrastructure ones. Thank you to the honourable members for them. As it relates to the sector analysis, so why would we do that, and what's particularly unique, certainly in a developing world context, is the World Bank would have engaged at what is called a sub-regional level, at a provincial level. This wasn't a benchmarking at the national level. It was work done in our context, in our situation. We looked at the school environment or the learning environment, and there are nuanced differences, and I'll touch on that because it relates to the other questions. I mean, unlike, looking at the legacy, the apartheid design and the distribution of schools, we don't have, for example, as is in the Western Cape, in the Eastern Cape or in the Northwest, a condensed, a huge number of smaller schools, mud schools that, would have had, we've had to think about how do we improve and standardize and improve, the quality of schooling there. We've had a more sparsely distributed school landscape, not quite even as dense as one would imagine in the bigger towns or in the cities. And so we are thinking deeply about two things: equity and excellence. And so, I'll touch on the infrastructure in a bit, but the benefit that the World Bank had immediately brought to the table is we had steered it to focus on leveraging the benefit of having done this work in other countries, in other poorer countries, in other developing low-income settings, because we wanted to smash some of the assumptions that it's harder to for poorer children to achieve the kind of academic outcomes. Clearly, there are factors that impact on it. And so as we think about the environmental stuff, the relationship between violence and safety with learning, with nutrition and feeding with learning. And then we got into the classroom, and the pragmatic advice was so stark. I mean, it was almost obvious, but I think it gave immediate benefit in that we are, whilst we are a positive outlier and we are, performing relatively speaking better than other provinces, that's not the measure of academic progress. We know that for the investment we make into education, we should see higher outcomes. And so our focus has been acute on, firstly, what can we do that makes us more efficient? And the practical advice was, we're hitting on the right curriculum interventions. We're doing the right things in terms of developing proficiency in reading and numeracy. We just have too many things going on. And so refocusing and prioritizing and picking one or two that we know works and scaling those and reaching more children with those curriculum and other interventions was an immediate benefit. Very technical advice around how do you assess progress? How do you assess learning outcomes? Which sounds obvious, but the inconsistency around how one school assesses academic outcomes or progress versus the next one, technical assistance as well. But most importantly, what we had wanted to do is not to validate that what we were doing is right. As I said, we didn't use it as an evaluation process. The primary benefit of what the World Bank would have brought to the table is how do we go about addressing the things that we now acknowledge is a problem? How do we do that? What are the steps? What are the development steps, the action steps? And so whilst we haven't, as I said earlier, incorporated it into our annual plan, we are increasingly thinking of taking forward some of those technical recommendations. Two stands out, and it links to the question. One is start right at the early learning phase. So that was a validation, but there was also practical advice around how, in a diverse context like ours, we might want to do it. The value of a center-based strategy, in other words, put ECDs at schools versus running strong community or parental programs, which are models that works in other countries and other settings as well. And we're still thinking strategically through that. But they also gave us advice around public-private partnerships, looking at the legal context, looking at the financial context, looking at what is possible in the way that we can create the right policy environment and then get on and build a case for investment. We were very clear that we have economic rationale. And so the benefits are multiple, but in the way that teachers and our practitioners and our school leaders might appreciate it, the focus in the main was what's happening in the school. How do we deal with oversized large classes? How do we deal with unsafe, vulnerable school settings? What is the additional support we want to extend to them? So we continue to reflect on that advice with the intent of improving education generally, but also making it more accessible in an affordable way. So we can elaborate on the technical recommendations that we'll put into our plans. As regards, so again, the framing, honourable member, around infrastructure, we know those legacies are, there's a long tail of inadequacy. Not just the schools and the number of schools we have, high schools relative to primary schools, but these schools generally, our schools generally, were built during the apartheid era. They are inadequate in its structural integrity. They fail. They are going to fail. The winds blow harder. The rains come down harder. And we are very, very acutely focused on safety and protecting those that operate within those school boundaries. And so balancing the budget allocation between preserving the 1,500 schools and those that we lease and take responsibility for funding the maintenance of, upgrading, maintaining, and securing those versus expanding it for those who seek access is the perennial challenge. But what we've now had to do in acknowledging the confidence that had come with additional national treasury allocations, for example, 2.5 billion, for example, over the 2024-25 MTEF, which carries on. It's not just rapidly expanding, it's rapidly expanding quality. And so this becomes a design problem. We do have an inadequate distribution of schools, particularly between urban and rural, but now we need to think about urbanization. Now everybody, those who seek in their perception, quality education, are they moving to big towns or big cities? And what about what we call peri-urban, Atlantis, Grabouw, Malmesbury, towns in their own right with cultures and traditions and expectations in its own right. How do we design and build the right school? So in summary, what I want to say is we acknowledge the deficit, that we have to speed up, and we have had confidence purely on the basis of we've delivered on our promises. I would like to use that as a measure of financial allocation for service delivery. Then the services must be delivered. So what we've tried to do, it's true for ECDs. It wasn't true for primary schools because the ratio was still roughly 3.5 to 1, 3.5 primary schools to 1 high school. In Verliersdorp or in any other similar town, Glen William, one former Model C school, one oversubscribed former House of Rep school, and then a changing demographic that impacts on language considerations. We know we've got our work cut out to integrate in our design and as a catalyst, integrate communities, etc. So our strategy is balancing service delivery pressure with new demand. What I mean is, in terms of the immediately realizable right, between 7 and 15-year-olds, it's the 13, the 12 to 15-year-olds at grade 8, that service delivery pressure is most pronounced. I mean, we've started or restarted this infrastructure program dealing with creating more capacity at high schools, because it's a wonderful progressive step to have more children attain a higher level of education, grade 8, grade 12, etc. That wasn't possible 20, 30 years ago. So now, in our rural settings, and specifically I'll point to the last 5 years in the West Coast, for example, with Saldanha and Maritzburg, and now, and Darling last year, and now in Malmesbury, we wouldn't necessarily think that that is a sustainable way. It's not just addressing the inadequacies and the deficit of the past. It's saying that those towns and those communities, the children, particularly in those areas, they deserve quality access because they're getting on the bus to Atlantis. And whilst it's still their choice to get on the bus to Atlantis or to Durbanville, we are now going back into Maritzburg, whilst others might say, down the road in the city of Cape Town, shouldn't you be putting that into Makassar or whatever the case may be? So it's a very sensitive matter, and I want to link, if I may, respectfully to the point that Honourable Said made. We can't do this in isolation. The bulk services, we are in every dorp, in every community. We need water and electricity and functional sewage services. It's not a functional learning environment if we can't provide the basic services. So our strategic attempts to accelerate infrastructure and deal with, Honourable Member, as you say, a more fair and equitable distribution between rural, is to focus on how do we work with the municipalities. And there's a lot of work to do because the municipalities are driven by different incentives. We found in the city of Cape Town, which is closest to where we find the demand, we found huge lessons around how we might pull together with the city of Cape Town. And an example of that was a more recent development, which is still in its infancy, land that the city owns, not the province, the city, making that, selling that, disposing of it, selling that at heavily discounted rates for education purposes. And so the link I'm making to Honourable Said's question is that that project in Manenberg was land being sold to a school, private school, at 10% of market value. So we need those catalytic, those intents materialize beyond the political will. We need the actual practical manifestation of, firstly, can we get access to state land, province or city? And that will help us with fair and equitable distribution. A lot of it sits in private sector hands right now. But the state, the government lands, municipal, particularly in the emerging and growing big towns of George, and even as I reflect on Malmesbury, it's having very incisive conversations with those municipalities and saying we can only do this together because it's government realigning on its development targets and objectives. So we're very positive that we've started to find a way to engage municipalities who are clearly, they think about who's going to pay the bill, who's going to pay the rates, who's going to pay the services, etc. So we put more capital in and we build water plants. Remember Said's question as well. We build water plants, we build electricity, particularly the solar intervention has been beneficial in reducing operating costs. So the picture I'm trying to sketch, honourable members and chairs, infrastructure now becomes a catalyst. There's confidence because of our progress to unlock the challenges and the issues that prevents rapid delivery of more schools and classrooms. If we are to build more schools, there's an additional consideration of how do we make it good? The excellence that comes with it needs the people, it needs the services, it needs the community. And so those things take a little bit longer than just, with all respect, laying down the bricks. That's communication, that's negotiation with communities, some of whom do not want more schools because traffic and other unintended impacts that comes with it. So we are more sensitive to what are the conditions under which we can accelerate infrastructure. And whilst it has been easier, member state, if I can make this link, we find in Kraaifontein, for example, an excessive demand of the need for high school places. But when we spoke the language of let's go in and build a primary school and extend quality education at the primary school level into the early learning and really invest into grade R facilities, the community was on board, right? So notwithstanding the demand for grade 8 or grade 9 places, where to have a very technical conversation around who will it benefit if there are deficits in the system and what does a high school bring, we would do both. We would then do the primary school and the high school as a strategy. And so that allowed us to get the community on our side. And because it's a broad acknowledgement that start as early as possible with the education process with ECDs, grade R's, primary schools, we know the need is high schools in Wallerstein, in Kraaifontein. But that's an example of we now think more than is the land available, is the water running, is electricity functioning? What will it take to accelerate getting to the point of opening a school and having the community on our side? And then we obviously broaden the conversation. Chair, before I conclude on my side on public-private partnerships is a very, in the Western Cape context, let me focus my response. We have what I call an enabling environment. There's strong policy incentive to open this up and partner. But the bigger reason why I think that is a strategic opportunity is that the value that's associated with education, I have to believe, is still prevalent with all stakeholders, communities particularly. There's a value attached to education. We can have a debate on that, but we believe that private partners, NGO partners, community organizations, community representatives, there's a general understanding. The other pressures are overwhelming, not having a jobs, etc. But we have to believe that we want to engage communities. So I don't see, member state, the promise of if I give 40 million rand, can you give 60 million rand and we build this 100 million rand school together? We are now in a conversation around if we are going to build a school together, can it be quality and can it expand opportunities to learners? The conversation goes a little bit wider. And to our private partners, we don't necessarily think beyond the capital. We say, well, actually, if we're going to run a quality ECD facility, the money lies in the resources that comes after that. It's dealing with the unpreparedness of a child, life skills, etc. Can an NGO get around that school and support that whilst we teach? So the cost of operating a new school hasn't been our focus before. And what I mean to add in threading the relationship between building infrastructure and being more fair and equitable, we want to go in with good schools at the same time. That has to be in partnership. The private sector can do something by way of funding, but also management support. But we think the key is in places where we've got excessive demand, despite us building, in Delft, in Menenberg, in Makassar, in Grabouw, we do think the strategic opportunity is ourselves and private sector and NGOs and communities actually moving together. Because I think the funding equation is working itself through. The value of a public-private partnership comes with funding. But I think we're also saying, let's have a real conversation about can we deliver quality education where you want to put that school? What would another school in Mitchells Plain do? What would another school in Philippi do? That we, have we learned together from what we have to change? So it's a broader response to your question, but I think the openness with talking education with municipalities, and you spoke about the incentive there, why would they not, and why would the bureaucracy kick in? Well, because they want an assurance that we're going to pay 30 million rand to widen the roads first. And they want a conversation about why we should invest as a developer into putting more bulk infrastructure for sewage. So we are a developer in our own rights, and that's not the conversation. We are now in a position, with the minister's assistance, to bring more capital funding to the table as provincial government, enabled and supported by National Treasury. But that's not enough. We now need to say to our municipalities, no, you'll get the benefit of us bringing investment into your district, town, whatever. But also beyond that, let's think about how we might run services beyond that, because you still need to take responsibility for your local services. And it's a much more enriched conversation, and I hope the examples that might be in the back of your mind, Honourable Said, I think the approach from Western Cape Education Department. We'd rather have an education conversation, and then we can talk money later. So I think that's moved the municipality. The City of Cape Town has shown us an intention fulfilled to get behind education. I'd like to think the other 26, 27 municipalities in the Western Cape could do that as well. So we'll continue to work on that. Thanks, Chair.
Just Chair, just on the School of Skills, we opened one recently in Ashton, not an expense, a new school that we have there. But more significantly, I think, is around the qualification that the learner leaves with at the end of the School of Skill. That is a challenge we're fighting currently quite ardently at national level, because we want the learners to leave with a qualification that says something outside of the sector. Because at the moment, as you may be aware, there is no formal qualification for that. But I think and this is what we're challenging at the moment. So before we get into the real fight of building more facilities, let's get the qualification sorted out. And so a lot of our energies and focus is in that space at the moment to try and get that sorted out. And we're even meeting with the CETAs as well to see, what are the various possibilities that we could look at. And already Mr. Lauriston and his team has started that process of meeting with the CETAs as well, to talk around the qualification of the learner at the School of Skills. Thanks.
Thank you. Just three quick points. Certainly, I mean, as Bertram Lauriston has set out, the department has made some very good progress with career guidance and our career clubs. And I'm reminded, Honourable Ferdinand Christian, just how important career guidance is, because I recall 40 years ago, after doing a battery of tests with our guidance counsellor, I was called in and asked whether I had any interest in becoming an engineer. Thankfully, I said I had no interest in becoming an engineer, and the guidance counsellor's response was, thank God. So obviously, I didn't do particularly well in that section of the tests. But I do think there was a 2014 policy proposal made to DBE by a national, I emphasize, national task team that recommended that we rethink and reconfigure life orientation in grade 12 to focus almost exclusively on career guidance in that final year of school to better prepare learners for the world of work, and to make particularly, and I've seen this in some of our high schools, to make learners aware of what opportunities actually are out there and what funding opportunities exist, so that learners have a much better prospect of either entering the world of work or further and higher education. Then on the whole question of, to the Honourable Said, on public-private partnerships, I certainly think that we have done a lot better over the last few years in facilitating more private sector investment into particularly independent schools serving poor communities. And there are two very good recent examples. Of course, the Further Leap School investment in Paarl, and also the Calling Academy, which the new Calling Academy opened up in Paarl. Two subsidized independent schools offering high quality education to low income learners in Paarl. And I also am pleased that you've touched on the question of municipalities. I think the City of Cape Town at the moment leads in this domain, not only supporting our department to facilitate investment, both public and private, in schooling and unblocking all the, if you like, the blockages to which you referred, but also, and I'm delighted that Sali Abrahams mentioned this, being very innovative, devising or developing a new policy where city land can be made available to independent school operators, non-profit independent school operators, providing again, quality education to learners from poor communities. And of course, the first example is Manenberg, as Sali Abrahams has said. But I would emphasize, if you do come across any independent school operators or potential independent school operators who are struggling or battling in a particular municipality, please bring those examples to my attention so that we can work with those potential providers to unblock whatever blockages may exist, either at provincial level or at municipal level, so that we can get those schools up and running here in the Western Cape. And then finally, to the Honourable Donita Stevens, what is the biggest challenge, particularly over the next 5 years? I think the point that our HOD, Brent Walters, makes regularly is that the education system is highly complex and there are huge challenges. But from a macro level, I think the biggest challenge that we will face over the medium term is not just the level of funding of education, but also the uncertainty surrounding the level of funding. You will recall, and I mean, again, our HOD, Brent Walters, has made reference to this numerous times before this committee, the almost unprecedented in-year budget cuts, which are unprecedented in the education sector, make it very, very difficult for us to plan on the infrastructure side and the provisioning side, particularly because, unlike other departments, we are up against a hard, non-negotiable deadline, and that is normally on or about the 15th of January every year when the school gates open. So I expect that to be the biggest challenge in a sort of very competitive, if you like, basket of challenges for the education sector here in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister, HOD and team. I think I'm just going to be asking here if we've got any questions on the provincial targets that are, I think, on slides 14 through 20, and then standardized targets, because I think we've now dealt from ECDs right through to careers and to the funding of infrastructure. So I think we've almost covered the entire spectrum now. I don't know if there are any further questions. I see Member Syed. Are you going to be the last question, or somebody, Member van Minnen, after that? Any further questions? Okay, I think those will be the last two questions then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, for your indulgence, and thank you to the MEC and the team for the responses. They were quite helpful. In fact, we'll take some of the issues forward with the department and just expand offline. But just two aspects, I think, which speak to, I think, what has been raised, and it's very important still. The whole issue, I don't know where it fits in, but it does. Learner transport, just very, very briefly. I just wanted to get a sense as to how is the department aligning its strategic priorities to address some of the learner transport challenges across the province, particularly in the rural Western Cape. And I want to come to a case, and I know that I've raised it before, and just to see what's the latest in terms of the progress now in Klaver and Hoërskool van Reinsdorp as well, where learners from Klaver that are attending Hoërskool van Reinsdorp, despite having had the applications approved, they are still without learner transport. I just wanted to get a sense as to what is the latest in that regard in particular, and what's the plan to basically address that, and similar cases where you've got plans being approved. I understand that there may be resource constraints, but just where applications have been approved and then there's bottlenecks, whatever challenges that stand in the way, and these learners are still left standing. They are out there far away on the border with the Northern Cape. So sometimes it starts becoming, just in terms of these matters only tend to reach us via our public representatives that side. We don't often get to go there to really see. So I just wanted to get a sense as to broadly, but also just that specific case. And then finally, with regards to and I know currently there is the issue of basically parents who have been applying online. Is there a plan still in place to zero rate the WCED application portal to ensure, basically, to ensure that it's not limited to locations with Wi-Fi connectivity? That's it from my side for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Said. Member van Minne.
Thank you. I think it's really for my own clarity more than anything else. On slide 18, that's on the right-hand corner, it talks about output indicator. I realize these are targets. I'm just wanting to ask, so it says percentage of learners in grade 3. I've always got to count backwards when I think about grades. Attaining acceptable outcomes in language, 43.5. Percentage of learners in grade 3 attaining acceptable outcomes in reading for meaning, 48.8. But then the percentage of learners in grade 3 attaining acceptable outcomes in mathematics is 52.6. Isn't reading and understanding essential for maths? Or am I making the mistake of thinking in grade 3 that it's more of arithmetic than it actually is language? If you could just explain that to me. Thank you.
That's what we call a great question. I don't know if anybody, if I may, Chairperson, may I go ahead? Thank you. I don't know if anybody is able to answer the last question. Sally, if you can give it a stab. If you can try and give that last question, that great question, a stab. But I do want to just say one thing about target setting and outcomes. What you tend to do over time is you sort of say, okay, I want to achieve 40% in this. So then if you achieve the 40%, then the next time you go out and have an opportunity to revise, you try and make that slightly higher. Clearly, obviously, if you look at the target, even, one of them is below 50%. So, clearly we also in a framework where our target setting is governed by SMART principles, specific, measurable, achievable, realizable, time-bound. So we can't also put a stretch target in that thing, even though really we would want to put a stretch target. We can't, because people will say to us, well, then you weren't realistic. You're going to put a 70% target there and try and achieve 48%. That's not realistic. But Sally and others can maybe just try and answer. I don't know if Sally also able to answer the question about transport in Clavo, or you're able to answer it. Okay, Sally, can I hand to you, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question. I seriously deeply appreciate this question, because I think it's often misinterpreted. So when it comes to Program 7, our assessment or evaluation program, just wanted to clarify, or clarifications. The percentage of learners attaining acceptable outcomes in language or mathematics at grade 3, this is based on a benchmark test or a standardized test that we administer uniquely in the Western Cape. There are pass rate requirements for that. The first clarification is that, particularly when it comes to assessing language, the systemic test is not a reading test. It has some passages for comprehension, but it also tests other concept and curriculum areas, vocabulary at that particular grade. And so we see, for example, across languages of English, Afrikaans, and isiXhosa, which we test in grade 3. In grade 6, it's only English and Afrikaans. We are then able to spot deficits in particular curriculum coverage when it comes to language and mathematics. So the relatively lower target, the second point of clarity is, of course, this is in a post-COVID environment. They're now hitting the 2019 levels, but there had been children that had been less prepared and so therefore had missed picking up these particular literacy skills at the early age. And so we particularly are measuring it at the grade 3, and that's the nuance that we use our systemic tests. We do have international benchmark tests with pearls at grade 4 for reading, and that's the first time we start linking our systemic test at grade 3 to the international test at grade 4. The target, as Honourable Member correctly points out, for reading and viewing, this is a reading target where we do then get more specific around what's the proficiency in reading and the science that goes with it, decoding and understanding, being able to read, comprehend, and more than infer, just show an understanding, a deep understanding of reading. We do have an acute focus now. Can a child, and this is again relevant to the language context, where there may not be, or if there are, they're still developing, there aren't norms and standards for reading, words per minute, etc. And so we are more accurate in assessing reading for meaning. Did the child read and understand and show a proficiency in that regard? So and then the last clarification is, I think the assumption that might have been behind the question is correct. At grade 3 level, it's numbers and operations. It's bucket counting. It's not word sums. It's not algebra. At grade 6, we can see particularly, well, grade 4 to 6 at the intermediate level, we see the relationship between language and the proficiency demonstrated in maths. In other words, being able to answer a maths question, we can spot now that the child may not even have understood the question because of a language deficit. And so at grade 6 is more sensitive, but grade 3, it is, children at that age group will see a number, be able to divide a 1-digit or 2-digit by 2-digit, etc. Number operations more prevalent there. Word sums or spatial space and shape. That's probably grade 6 where language matters.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just in terms of the route WCE 797, member said was instituted in February of this year from Klaver to Van Reinsdorp. Subsequent to that route being approved, we have received 25 additional requests as late as the end of last term for learners to be transported. That was going to serve that served at the bus committee on the 14th of May, and there were recommendations made, and that submission is still en route to the HOD for finalization. So I think maybe by the end of this week we will have a response, because the sign-off is quite a few officials before it gets to the HOD, but it's en route to the HOD for sign-off and the decision on that 25 additional learners. Thanks.
Thank you. I am advised that the portal is 0 rated. And certainly if there are outstanding matters on the case to which Mr. Alan May has referred, please raise them with me so that matter can be resolved speedily. Thank you.
Fine. I think that then concludes our questions. Have you got something to follow up there, Member Said?
I know I said it's the end for me, but it's just on the 0 rating. I know, and thank you for the response on the Klaver one. And I think, Mr. Mayor, I will just follow up if there's anything. I'll wait until the end of the week just to see. And I'm glad some of the parents are tuned in on the YouTube. But just on the 0 rating, I just wanted to see, MEC, if we could just get a sense on which network is the application website 0 rated, for which network in particular. And I say this because we have been engaged also by a network service provider who is willing to 0 rate it on their network without any cost, and something to put forward for the department. And we've written to the department in that regard. But I just want to get a sense on which network, then that makes it easier for us to further engage. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm unsure. We can revert to you on that, but what I think a better way of dealing with it is to the extent that you might have information about this additional provider, please provide that to me. I'll provide it to the department so that we can either take up the opportunity or not, depending on the department's evaluation and assessment.
Good. I think that then brings us now towards the end, towards wrapping up. And I think I want to thank you, Minister, thank you, Department, for your briefing. I think a most informative briefing that has gone well beyond the mere indicators that we have. And I think that provides the committee certainly with a greater depth of understanding of the work that is being undertaken within the department. So thank you very much for those efforts. And I think we then also just look forward moving into the annual report season quite soon in terms of what the previous year has been. And as we also move to tomorrow, we again at budget. So we got to go through that cycle once again, quite possibly. But all of the best then for this year, for 25, 26, in chasing these targets for the year. I'm not sure, Minister and HOD, if you've got any closing remarks.
Thank you very much. We look forward to the further engagements, obviously, as you said, on the budget, and then ultimately during the annual report season.
I think that then brings us to the end of this, and the department minister, you are then excused. We as a committee have a couple of small matters to deal with before we adjourn this meeting. But I'm sure there's tea and coffee and refreshments down the passage for everyone. Thank you. Yes, colleagues, I think we can now move to resolutions and actions. And if there are any recommendations or requests for information that we may have I'm not sure from perspective of committee. Member Christians.
Chair, I don't think the question that I said, you know, the ECDs in WCD and private institutions, what is the word? I ask when will that be standardized, that they have the same curriculum? So if they can just give us that process, when do they see, you know, that they're on the same level? Because my worry is that they're not getting the same quality education on grade R level.
Right, so that the rest, Member Sayed.
Chair, I think many of the issues that we raised, and which I think they still need to respond more to do, speak to what you have put in the program going forward. I think some of the visits speak to that. Some of the meetings that we have got planned do speak to that. So, and I think some of the issues we can also raise when the department briefs us on the annual report later on, and those stuff. So I don't have much, and I think maybe what we could do is maybe just prioritize. I think what's important is to prioritize a date for that meeting with the municipalities and the department. Thanks.
Yes, I think it would be interesting to get a good summary of what we've been briefed on, what has been said to us today on the municipalities and on the infrastructure. And I did suggest to procedural officer that maybe we must get have that she looks at that transcript, because I think it is very important that we get that level of progress and that level of coordination between the department and the municipalities in terms of that level of infrastructure. So,
just give another one, Chair.
Sure.
What is also, you see, I spoke about the 95%, curriculums, what is the word he used? It's academic. And now they opened the one school of skills. But now the problem that they are facing, there's no accreditation if you pass, matriculate, in other words. So if we can just track, they're busy with speaking to CETA and basic education to make sure that there is accreditation, because they said they cannot actually build more schools of skills because you don't have a accreditation when you pass. So I mean, maybe we must just also keep our hand on that they get accreditation when they are completing the school of skills. Thank you.
Good. Right, is that the ball game basically? Everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are the resolutions and actions then. And I think that then brings us to the end of our proceedings today. I see it is just gone 3:15, so I'm accordingly adjourning the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon and evening.
Thanks.
Are we missing the truck?
I think you can get out of the building.
Yeah.
I have to stay. I've got a 6:15 dinner